I'm Marilyn Laszlo, and here I am back on the farm in Indiana where I grew up. This used to be a railroad track, and this is so neat because it's just 2 miles down the road from us, and my sister and my niece and sometimes my friends, we come out here and do a little exercise, and it's just gorgeous. I mean, there's wildflowers along the way, all kinds of birds. But there is a field up here a little ways that when where I used to plow and work for my dad, and the train would go through it here, and he'd always blow a whistle when he saw me on the track.
Good morning.
Morning. Well, we did offer something. Just a little rest here before we go the next 10 miles. Oh no!
I lost for words. It just amazes me. Short distance.
Boy, road.
The keys.
Well,
You
one
go
day
shopping.
I-
It's the cardinal.
Yes, it is. And what would be the state flower?
State flower is the Liriodendron tulipifera. I could go without hands. Whoa!
Oh, that was very impressive. I could too if I didn't have all these people.
No hands.
Put the brakes on. Oh, we got to figure out where are we going to eat tonight. You know, food is so major. Okay, guys.
All right, you
Load
got
it
it?
up.
All right, here goes one.
Bike one.
This is a heavy one. This is kind of retro.
All right, good job.
Or we won't have any bikes.
That's right. We'll just roll right up.
Where'd you get that terrible license plate?
Okay, you know what? This is a family thing. She went to Purdue,
Right.
and my sister and I went to Indiana University.
It's all dirtied up. Purdue doesn't get dirty.
Well, you know, it's because we work.
No, we
People who produce it behind a desk, these engineers.
No,
you know,
no,
they
we
sit
put
behind a
we put
desk.
people on the moon.
Huh?
We put people on the moon, and we're not going to tell them what Indiana University is known for, are we? We're going to hold back on that, aren't we? Yeah, I got you speechless, didn't it?
You can walk over towards the house or something.
You know, there's so many memories, and I think about that first night. What a night! And when I was back in the village, when I took a work party there a few years ago, I told that story while I was in the village, and we videoed it. So let's just take a look at that video right now. These canoes surrounded us, and these men were standing up in their canoes, and all they have are just vines around their waist and gourds, and they said something to us as we were sitting there in our canoe, and I don't know what they said, because the first time I'd ever heard the language, I imagine they said something like, Dimam Nutko Ko, Dimam Nutko, why are you here? What do you want? What are you doing? I don't know what they said, but I responded to these men in the trade language, Pidgin English. And I looked up at those guys and I said, Me too, Pilla, like, come now, Sinda Wante Mupilla. I said, the two of us, we want to come and live with you. Well, when I stop and think about what I said to them, that wasn't a very good start. But I said, Me too, Pilla, like, Kissim talk place belong you, Pilla. I said, the two of us, we want to come and learn your language. Zero understanding. So we went to shore. We tried to find somebody that had been out of the village, you know, and maybe met somebody during Second World War or worked on a plantation. Well, they beat the drums. They got the entire village gathered together, 400 and some people. And there the two of us sat on a log, and one leader after the other got up and gave a talk. We had no idea. We had no idea what anybody was saying. We knew that we were the center of their attention. They would circle around us, and they were pinching our skin. They were feeling our hair, you know, and looking in our faces. We were weird. Later on, we were told this long village discussion that they had, that the first half hour of that long discussion, they were trying to figure out. They were trying to figure out if we were male or female. And I said, well, thanks a lot. Well, it only took them a half an hour to figure it out, and they decided that we were neither. We were its. We were UBA. We were like ghosts or spirits from their ancestors, and that's kind of how it started. But they looked at us, and we didn't look too threatening. Puny white skin, funny hair, funny eyes. So they decided to let us come in, you know, only two of us, 400 of them. And they gave us a little house right over here on this hill, this little thatch roof house. And it was up on stilts, covered with bark floor and bark walls. And I remember that first night in that house. Well, our training prepares us very, very well for this. And we're trained, you know, to live in the jungle. We're trained to deal with isolation and long distances. And we're also given an orientation about the area. And we were told that in this area, about the common snakes. Now, one of the most common snakes in this area is the python. Now, that's not a poisonous snake. The python is actually a friendly snake. It can give you a squeeze or a hug. But when they're young, they like to live up in the thatch roof of the houses. Now, the other snake, I don't even know the English equivalent. They refer to it as a mabu. And it's a friendly snake. They call it a kissing snake. And all that snake wants to do is to get in bed with you or under your mosquito net. And during the night while you're sleeping, all that snake wants to do is suck the saliva out of your mouth. Now, can you imagine? Well, I'll tell you, when I put my woven mat down on the bark floor, hung up my mosquito net, and tucked that mosquito net in real tight, and then we blew out the lantern. Well, there's something about the jungle that comes alive at night. Actually, it's like God's symphony, but at night you have a lot of sound. But that roof became very active. There were the rats, the snakes, there were bats in the house, there were hundreds of lizards. But there was something about those bark walls. They came alive. I mean, it sounded like rain. Later on, we discovered that all four walls were covered solid with cockroaches. And when I woke up the next morning, the whole bottom part of my mosquito net had been eaten away by the cockroaches. There was just hanging out there in the open for anything to come in, like the maboob, the kissing snake, lizards, whatever. And people will say to me, well, Marilyn, aren't you afraid, or weren't you afraid? I said, well, give me a break. Even the people in the village are afraid of snakes and some of those kind of things. But, you know, when I think about the 23 years that I have lived in this village, and most of those years were under a thatch roof house, I have learned that the safest place in the whole world to be is in the center of God's will. And for me, that was Hauna Village. And from there, an incredible story started to unravel, where God came down to meet these people right in their own culture and in their own language. Planted some herbs in this little section here. My mother always had dill and mint. You know, one day, Wangamar, he's a leader of one of the 4 clans. And he came into our little thatch roof house, and he has something wrapped up in a green leaf. Well, you know, I've learned over the years, when they bring me something wrapped up in a green leaf, that's some special delicacy that they want to share with you to eat. Well, I have learned over the years that, you know, if I unwrap that, I better unwrap it carefully, because sometimes they're still alive and wiggling around. And of course, being a leader of the clan, no way am I going to offend him, so no matter what it is. But anyway, so I unwrap it very carefully, and sure enough, there they are, wiggling around. Well, at first I didn't know what these things were. Later on I was told they were a type of flying termite. Well, I didn't know how to eat these. I didn't know if I was to squeeze them, throw them down, step on them, smash them, cook them. So I said to Wangamar, I don't know how to eat these. What do I do? Oh, he says it's very simple. He just takes a whole handful and just pops them in his mouth, and starts eating. I said, oh my word. Well, you know, I'm not going to offend this man. And of course, you know, again, our training in Waco prepares us very, very well for these kind of things. And well, I'll just take a pinch. They're just little teeny things. I'll just take a pinch. So I looked out at those things, and I could see their beady eyeballs and their scrawny legs, and their wings were flapping. And I just get a hold of just a pinch. But they're all clinging to each other. Now and I'm trying to shake them loose. And I said, oh Lord Jesus, please bless this food. I'm willing to eat these all up if you're willing to keep them all down. So I popped them in my mouth, that whole long string of termites, and you know, they really weren't too bad. Actually, you know, we all know this. It's nothing more than a psychological barrier. Well, yeah, it's a pretty big barrier, but it is psychological. You know, once they stop wiggling around in there, you gotta chew fast. Well, you know, there was a period where I was by myself for a while. I lost my partner, and so I finally talked my sister Shirley into coming to join me. Well, Shirley's only 13 months younger than I am, and she was a school teacher. She was married, had 3 children, and 20-some years ago her husband left her and ran off. And anyway, when her 3 kids became independent, you know, she came to join me. And the village people were so excited that my real blood sister was coming to help me, and she was also a school teacher, and she could help them to learn to read and write and everything. Well, I'm telling you, I've been there 11 years, and so they wanted Shirley to, you know, really hurry up and learn everything about everything like the first week. Well, there were 40-some guys going out to the jungle, and they were going to cut down this huge tree to make a big, like a 60-foot dugout canoe, which is like some of their traditional war canoes. Anyway, we went deep into the jungle, and it is really beautiful, I'm telling you. Just, you know, orchids just growing off of the trunks of trees, and butterflies everywhere, bird paradise of the world. But anyway, while we were out there, I noticed that somebody came up to Shirley with something wrapped up in a green leaf. Well, so I was kind of watching her out of the corner of my eye. And she came running to me, and she says, Marilyn, what am I supposed to do with these? I said, oh, you know, I forgot to tell you. Well, what Shirley had were these big, fat, white, juicy worms or grubs that you find under dead logs in the woods. Well, this is a very special delicacy in our area. They used to bring these to me in a long stick, you know, roasted on a stick like a shish kebab. We call them grub kebab. But anyway, what Shirley had not been roasted. They had been steamed, and I mean, they still looked alive. But I'm kind of acting a little cocky, and I said, well, Shirley, just think of something pleasant. You can't offend these men. This is your first week in the village. And she says, Marilyn, I can't. Tell them I'm full. I'll have them later. I said, Shirley, well, we were going back and forth, and good thing, you know, they didn't really know any English at that time. But finally, all 40-some guys gathered around. They wanted to see what was going on here, and Shirley's standing right in front of me, and she says to me, well, you do it first. And I said, oh, brother, you know. But anyway, you know, I'd eaten all kinds of things these past 11 years. It was no big deal. So I take that big leaf with all those big grubs in it, and, you know, and I can see they're too big to swallow whole. I am going to have to chew it. And so I'm smiling, and Shirley, you know, standing right in front of me and acting really kind of cocky, and I just take that big, fat, white, juicy grub, I pop it in my mouth, and I start chewing. I'm smiling, I'm chewing. Oh, nothing to it, you know. It was soft and squishy, and green juice started to run down both sides of my mouth. I want to tell you something. Shirley's eyeballs got as big as saucers. I'm still chewing, I'm still smiling. Say, Shirley, green juice running down. Shirley, don't do it. This is gross. I think I'm going to throw up. Well, you know, it is, again, I say it's psychological, but sometimes, you know, it is really major. When they start to bring us grubs that are steamed, I just say, you know, can I have mine on a stick, well done? And then, you know, you don't offend the people, and it is, to them, it's a great blessing that we eat their food. Holes, this took, I could do, I think, 3 holes a day, and I was just totally worn out. Anyway. It's interesting about grapevines that they feel, you know, they have feelers where they go to where there's something that they can wrap around. I thought, well, maybe I built them too high. But no, they're going up there. I think it's very exciting. One of the things that I wasn't sure just how to trim grapevines. You have to do it right, and you have to do it in February when it's freezing cold. And I think I never get down quite as far, but I'm always afraid to go too far. Anyway, I love the grapevines. I think grapevines are so beautiful. Actually, I hate to cut down anything that's green. Like this thing growing right here. You know, these are just wild things that grow. Anyway. Okay. First couple years in the village was the most challenging for us, and the most difficult for me was the medical. And the last time I was in Hauna, I told a couple of these medical stories that were videoed. So let's just go back and have a look at those right now. Language learning was difficult, but I tell you, it was the medical work that was extremely hard for me, because the last thing on earth I ever wanted to be was a nurse. And here I was in a situation in this village where the life expectancy was between 30 and 35 years of age. The infant mortality rate was around 90%. In fact, there was one village where the infant mortality rate was 100%. For the first 7 years that we were in this village, not one single baby lived. And so all around us is this medical work, and so we just dug in. Our training prepared us very well for this. One week there were 16 people that died. They were afraid of our medicine. You know, they died of malaria and pneumonia, and we had medicine. Yet they would not let us give anyone a shot with our needles. They were afraid of the needle. They said, oh no, actually they referred to the needle as the same thing as a pencil, tudium. They said, oh no, you're not going to shoot us with the thorn. They said, you're not going to shoot us with the thorn. But this week when all these people died, 16 people, 2 very important men came to our house early in the morning. They called up to the house and they said, Melino, hawat kora, ingam siya badiyatin siya maku wigaga kora, hawat silan sukra. You come on down here, Marilyn. We have an old man here that's very, very sick, and we want you to shoot him, you know, with the thorn, the needle. And so I was really excited. Here was my first live case to give somebody an injection. So I got the medicine ready up inside my house and came down the steps of my house with my little fishing tackle box full of medicine, and the whole village was gathering around, and this was going to be the first shot that they had ever seen. And so here was this old man. He was our village father. We had heard he was very sick, but they wouldn't let us go see him. They would not let us give him any medicine or anything, and so here he was, and I could see what they were doing. This old man was just about dead. And so they were figuring, well, let's try the medicine on him. He's going to die anyway, and let's just see if it's going to work. And so here he was just hanging on to this post, and they were holding him up, and he just had this vine around his waist. So he was ready for the shot. So I knelt down, and I got the cotton with the alcohol, and I was going to clean a spot on his bottom. And the 2 medicine men came up to me, and they said, now see a Muga Howie, he has a very bad headache. And see a Oi Kabusu, and his chest hurt. And see a Brush Kabusu Nanai, and his ribs hurt. I said, well, they could come out. I said, I have medicine for all of that. And so as I was cleaning the spot on his bottom with this cotton and alcohol, everybody was gathering a little bit closer to see what I was doing. And then I got the 2 syringes, one for malaria, one for pneumonia. And I went to give him the injection. And I tell you that the needle just went boing. I mean, it just bent over, and his skin was as tough as crocodile skin, and he never had any clothes on. I said, oh my goodness, this is my first shot, and they're all watching, and so I just pulled it out, and I pretended that that's the way it's supposed to be. And I got another needle, and I put it in the syringe, you know, and I just kind of reared back and gave him the shot, and you know, he hardly moved. And but then the 2 big men came to me, and Chief somebody, he said, in a very angry tone, he says, Kara kore batibo mal kora. I told you that he had a very bad headache, and that his chest hurt, and that his ribs hurt, and now you have wasted all the medicine down here. We're never sick down here. This is always a strong, and it's a good area. I don't know about you white people, but now he hurts here, and here, and they were just totally disgusted. And I said, oh my goodness, we've just blown this whole thing. But you know, in a couple of hours, that old man, he was sitting up, and he was eating, and he was laughing, and that afternoon he was walking through the village as though he had never been sick. Now listen, I know I'm not a nurse, and I don't know a whole lot about medicine, but I do know that wasn't the medicine. That was the power of God, and what a breakthrough we had in our whole medical program right there. When a person in Hauna went into a coma, after a certain length of time, whether they were still breathing or not, the medicine man would pronounce the person dead, even though he was still breathing, because they had never seen a person come out of a coma. When the person could no longer speak or hear or respond or see, they would pronounce the person dead after so many days, and they would say, well, the spirit of this person has left, it's just the body. And so no one would allow us to give them an injection. A lot of these people went into a coma because of a certain type of malaria. And there was a time when Sobai here became very, very ill. And I heard that he was very sick, but no one would let us come and see him. And so one day when we were translating, all of my men and I were translating, somebody came running into the house and they said, Sobai has died. Well, I had learned to ask the question, is he still breathing? And they said, oh yeah, Emmy got wind, so Emmy died finished. He's still breathing, but he's dead, and they're getting ready to plant him. They're getting ready to bury him. Well, he was taken over across the river to another medicine man's house, and this medicine man was spitting and blowing and trying to bring him out of this coma. And so all the translators came and running in and said, come on, you've got to go over there. This is Ugyen's uncle. You've got to go and see if you can talk him into giving him a shot. And I said, okay, but I really didn't want to go because I knew that when a person was in a coma, they weren't going to listen to me. But anyway, I got my little fishing tackle box and the medicine, got into the canoe and paddled across the river where they had carried Sobai, this man. And of course, when someone is real sick and they're close to dying or they have died, they board up all the windows and the doors because they don't want any evil spirits to come in and steal away his spirit. And so when I climbed up the ladder to go into the house, I could hardly see. I mean, it was so dark, but all the people in the clan were there wailing and crying, and Sobai was laid out on a piece of bark because they were getting ready to wrap him up and carry him to the grave, and everybody was rubbing his head and his face, and they were throwing themselves all over him and spitting and blowing, and so I asked Uki, and I said, can I give Sobai a shot? Can I give him a shot? They said, oh no, the medicine man is standing there and he won't allow anybody to touch him. And so as I watched all the wailing, and I could see he still had a lot of movement, and so the medicine man got distracted and he went across the room there and was talking to some other people, and then Ugi says, do it now, do it now. The medicine man, he's not looking. And so I got out the syringe and the needle, and I was really shaking. I said, oh Lord God, please just help me. And so I didn't have any clothes on, and they turned him over on his side, and all the people were still hovering over him, and it was very dark, and I gave him the injection, and then I leaned over Sobai, and I leaned right against his ear, and I said, Sobai, do you hear me? This is Marilyn. Marilyn, Sobai, do you hear me? This is Marilyn. I said, Sobai, just say the name Jesus. Sobai, say the name Jesus. And I kept saying that, and pretty soon Sobai he just sat up. And his eyes were wide open, and in a loud voice he said, Jesus. And I mean, immediately all the wailing in the house had stopped, because they had never seen a person come out of a coma. And that was so powerful. That was in a matter of 30 seconds. And you know, as well as I do, that was not the medicine. That was the power of the name of Jesus. No other name under heaven by which man can be saved, the name of Jesus. And that's what he said. And I tell you, this man then became involved in our translation work and became one of what they called the judges. And every day he would come, help us listen to what we had translated for that day to see if we had the proper meaning. And so he became a very, very special friend, and here he is today. He started on you. I think we're going to have to come through the other side around there. I just want to see if it's doable. I need to get the weed whacker in here and just cut cut that all down. Oh gosh. I gotta get a new hose. Yeah, this is very heavy. Plus, it's buried in the ground. Been here for 20 years. But it'd really be handy, though, to have this. Well, that's my other challenge, get this thing out of here. I thought maybe I could pull it over with a tractor. I was just reminiscing about those early days. You know, we didn't have a telephone all the way through my high school years. And I remember when we first got the telephone right in this house where I lived ever since I was a little girl. You know, we take so many things for granted. When I try to relate it to Papua New Guinea, of course, they'd never seen telephones, they had never seen lights, they had never seen a car. And I remember, you know, how fascinated they were with our radio. I mean, we had a radio that we had to make contact with our mission station. We were about 350 miles away from Ukarampa, which was our mission station, and we stayed in the village about 3 months at a time. And so we were supposed to come up on the radio at least twice a day, in the morning and in the evening. And of course, you know, if we didn't come up 3 days in a row, they sent a helicopter to find out what the problem was. Anyway, of course, we're located 500 miles up the Sepik River in New Guinea, and it's a pretty remote area. So every night we'd get on the radio and we'd call Mike Oscar, this is 86 Alpha Juliet, do you copy, do you copy? And what we didn't realize, every evening more and more people were gathering around the house at night, in the late evening, listening to us talk on the radio. Well, I didn't, you know, we didn't think a whole lot about that. And, but later on I found out that they would go back to their houses and they were trying to figure out, how does that work? How does that work? Those two get on the radio and they're talking into this little black box. And then the black box just talks back to them. How does that work? Well, they finally figured it out, and they decided that there were just little white people in the radio. And you know, that innocence, that's just childlike innocence. Well, you know, they were looking at that Sears catalog, and they saw all these people. That's all it was, people in the Sears catalog, and they were real little people. So white people come in different sizes, real little, real big, and I think about that story and how delightful, you know, their minds are not all cluttered with all this technology and all the things that we have invented since our forefathers came to the United States. And in some respects, it's a lot easier to witness to people like that. But the other thing is, you know, Australia controlled Papua New Guinea, which is the other one half of the island, and there were a lot of fighting during the Second World War on that island. Anyway, Australia is considered the mother country. They were trying to prepare Papua New Guinea for independence. And so they were asking all the missionaries to bring a radio. They're going to develop some radio stations on the 4 main cities along the coast. And they were going to start teaching the Papua New Guinea people the trade language, because there was no national language, just 850 some different languages. Well, if you're going to have a country that's going to become independent, they've got to have a common language. And so they thought, well, let's start with the trade language. And so all the missionaries, we all brought radios into the areas we were working in. And this was so delightful to watch these people in the evening sitting around this radio. Because basically, most of them were monolingual. They only spoke their language, and so that's why they needed the help of the missionaries. So the radio guy, he's telling him a little bit of some Pidgin English, the trade language, vocabulary. So they say, okay, for the greeting, you'd say, you stop good, and then all these guys would say, you stop good, and they would try to repeat it, which means, are you okay, how are you, which is the equivalent to English, how are you? And so the response would be, yes, me stop good, yes, me stop good, and they would all repeat it, just such a delightful scene. Well, this went on for 7 years. And they were teaching them all the government, you know, words like government, government. They'd all say government, government, and they would say consul, consul, and then you know, and then they'd all repeat consul, consul. And then the word for independence, which they were having a little bit of trouble pronouncing, independence. You're going to have your freedom, which means you're going to have your independence, and they all would try to say the word independence, independence. Well, there was a time that I had to go into our mission station. And so I had to go downriver to the airstrip, and our mission plane would take us in. And of course, their word for plane was flying canoe. And of course, nobody in the village, of course, have been in a plane. And I had to take 2 of our men with me. I was going to check my alphabet paper, some linguistic paper with our translation department. So we get into this little single-engine plane, fly off to our mission station. And so while we were there, of course, they saw that we had a nice store where our missionaries got our supplies. And they loved the steel axe and the steel machete because basically they were Stone Age people. But the other thing that was very interesting that they wanted underpants. I said, underpants, oh, that's great. They're going to start wearing clothes, you know. And but they wanted like women's underpants, children's underpants, men's underpants. And we just about wiped the store out of underpants. And I really didn't understand what was going on here. But I thought, well, maybe they're just starting to think about wearing clothes instead of leaves and gourds and string skirts, and because we don't really focus on that a lot. So we get back to the village, and then the guys are around the radio in the evening. Then the radio man says, you know, it's about 1 week away from giving you your independence. So we want you to start gathering food so that you can have a big celebration. Every village in New Guinea is going to start celebrating, have a sing-sing, and have a big feast, so start getting the food ready. So now it was time for the day. September, I think it was September 17, 1975. Here we go. So that morning they get up and everybody's in a very festive mood. And we're looking out of the screen of our little thatch roof house, and here all these people are in canoes, and they've got their underpants on. Everybody's got underpants, women, children, men, every color, every size. They had been hearing this word for 7 years, independence, independence, and they were hearing it as underpants, underpants. And so everybody was celebrating, we're free, we have our underpants. Well, you know what? Yeah, it's a delightful story. But the moral of the story is that sometimes we think that they understand what we're saying when we start speaking in a different language. And of course, that's what Wycliffe Bible Translators is all about, giving them, you know, the Word of God in their own language. So we learn their language. And it's a very slow process. And we can make a lot of mistakes. And so that's why it's when you do in Bible translation, you're going very, very slow. And it was an incredible lesson to me how important it is that these people have the written word in their own language. Not only the written word, but their reading books, and where they begin to read their own language before you start teaching them a second language. And that's one of our strong policies in Wycliffe. Teach them their own language first. Incredible lesson, but a delightful story. When we start a translation, which is, of course, the heart of our work, it takes about 4 or 5 years to get to that point. And some of the words are very, very difficult to find, like, the word for righteousness and justification and sanctification and mercy, grace. I mean, how do you act those words out, and how do you point to it? You can't. But they're all there. God has created every single language in the world. And it took us about 7 years to find the word for soul, which really is very difficult to even define in English. The soul, which is really the heart of man. And I was translating with these young fellas, and one Saturday, Ronnie Kadiman, one of the translation fellas, went off hunting on Saturday morning. He had his dog, had his spear, bow and arrow, and got in his canoe and went out to the lake and parked his canoe, and then he was just shooting some birds and some small tree animals. And anyway, because he had the dog with him, the dog started chasing a wild boar. Well, the thing about wild boars, they're very, very dangerous. In fact, they're very aggressive. More people have been killed in our village from wild boars than from crocodiles or snakes or anything like that. So you don't go out hunting in the jungle alone, especially if it's wild boar hunting. Usually there's 20, 30 men that go with their spears, and their dogs will circle the wild boar, and then the men will all, throw their spears, and then what happens is after they throw their spears, then everybody finds a tree and they run up a tree because it's just so dangerous, a dangerous sport. But anyway, Ronnie's dog started chasing this wild boar. So Ronnie runs after the dog, and they go deeper and deeper and deeper into the jungle until he was lost. Now, in all the years I've been in New Guinea, nobody's ever gotten lost. I mean, that's their way of life. If they get disoriented or something, they climb a tall tree to see where the river is or where the lake is, and they just head in that direction. And Ronnie realized that he was confused, and so he climbed a tall tree, but he couldn't. All he saw was a canopy of jungle. He couldn't see the river. He couldn't see the lake. And now it was getting ready for the sun to go down, and he was starting to panic. And of course, he had asked Jesus into his life, and he was a believer. And so he started to talk to Papa God. Oh, oh, Papa, I'm scared. I'm lost. Please show me the road. So back in the village, the people became very concerned because they realized that Ronnie hadn't shown up yet. And I tell you, they always know where their people are. They're just incredible. And so they realized that they knew Ronnie had gone off with his dog to go hunting somewhere by the lake. And so they started beating the drums so that Ronnie could hear the drums and maybe start following the sound. Well, now the sun went down. Now it's dark. Now the people are really concerned because he's a young boy. I'm not sure that he's even a teenager yet. Nobody knows how old they are. So the women then start wailing. So now we hear all this wailing, and then we were told that one of the boys had lost. He hasn't come back, and he's been gone all day. So they're beating the drums. They're wailing, and they said, well, if he doesn't come back, as a young boy, he's not going to make it. He's not going to survive the jungle with all the animals that are out there and the dangers that are out there all by himself. Well, the thing is, Ronnie, these people know how to fight or start a fire without matches, and hopefully he had started a fire to keep himself safe from animals. But the wailing went on all night, and I was really sick. I thought, golly, one of my main believers and, one of the main translators, he's such a sharp fella. And I didn't sleep all night. And the next morning, two of the other translators, I think it was Tom and Jonah, they got in their canoe and went out to see if they could find his canoe. Well, they found his canoe, and they had brought a drum and one of these big shells that you blow in. Well, Ronnie, that night, he kept climbing these tall trees. And he said, he was talking to God, he says, I'm really afraid, and Kari Inigen. He says, my name, I don't want to lose my name. Well, when Tom and Ronnie were out there beating the drum, they have this jungle noise or yell that they make if they hear one another, so they can find each other by just keep yelling. And so Ronnie heard the drums, and he heard this shell that they were blowing through. And so Ronnie made this loud jungle, "Ayo!" And so he came. He heard the sound, and so they were so delighted, Tom and Jonah, that so they kept beating the drums. And finally, Ronnie came into the village, and of course everybody was rejoicing. Everybody really felt that God had answered prayer, and so. What I did was I had Ronnie tell the story on the tape recorder. That's how you find new vocabulary. If something real unusual happens in the village, something that's not the normal everyday happenings. So I told the story on the tape recorder. Of course, I started writing it out word for word, and of course the words I knew the meaning of, I would put the English underneath it. And I got to this phrase, Kari Inigen. I'm afraid I'm going to lose my name. I'm afraid I'm going to lose my name. Well, I never heard that expression. And so I asked, well, what does it mean? Kari Inigen. It's like it's a Badiyugwisi. It's going to just disappear and it's going to be gone. Oh, well, that means I'm gone. I'm finished. I'm done. I'm no more. And so I thought about that. I said, well, that's a very, very powerful word for death. And so I decided to experiment with this word. And so I used different things and found out that this word, this phrase, which about your name, you're never going to lose your name. It's the word for soul. You're never going to lose your soul, which is the real you, the real you. And and so I said, Jesus has come, that we would never lose our name, that our name will live on and on forever, which is, the word for soul. Languages are so fascinating. I don't care how remote the area is. We're able to translate even difficult things in the Bible. It's all there. It's all there. Anyway, when we got to Revelation, and we were translating in Revelation, we were in chapter 3, we came to this verse that became one of their favorite verses in all of the Bible, when they found out that their name would live on and on forever. In other words, they would always live on forever and ever if they've asked Jesus into their life. So this verse reads like Revelation 3:5, he who overcomes will like them be dressed in white. I will never, never blot out his name from the book of life, but will acknowledge his name before my Father and his angels. And they said, you mean when we ask Jesus into our throat, the throat is the center of feeling and emotion and life. It's not the heart. That's meaningless. So you ask Jesus into your throat. It said, when we ask Jesus into our throat, you mean that our name is written in Papa God's carving? I said, yeah. I said, and nobody can ever blot it out. Once you ask Jesus into your life, that your name gets into God's book. And I said, that's how you get to heaven. If your name's not there, you're not going to be able to get in. And they said, you mean it's like a ticket? And they figured out, that some of the things that we introduced them to when they went into the coastal towns, that you have to have a ticket to get into some events. And you mean it's like a ticket? You can't, if your name is written, then you can come in. And then they said, well, does Papa God really know how to say my name right? Because you white people, you mess up our names terrible. I said, yes, Papa God, he knows how to say your name right, and he knows how to spell it right. And that became such a very, very powerful discovery when we found the word for soul, which is your name. And when you think about it, this whole Bible is full of names. In fact, that's the most exciting part, or one of the most exciting parts of the Bible. When we were doing the Old Testament, they saw these chapters where there's name after name after name. And what we normally do, we just kind of skip over those names. And they said, no, you can't skip over the names, because that's the proof. That's the proof that this is God's carving, Papa God's carving. All of the names. And see, names are very important in many of these cultures, where each clan has a whole set of names. And those are the only names that you can use to name your children, as just from those clans, the clan that you're in. And so, yeah, that's the proof. That's the proof. All the names to them are very, very important. That's what it's really all about when I stop and think about it. And what a lesson I learned from these men, how excited they got about the fact that their name was written in the book of life. And I trust that every one of you have this assurance that your name is written in the book of life, and no one could ever blot it out.